Does counting to 10 actually cure anger? I mean, really think about it for a second. The last time you felt your blood absolutely boiling. The last time you were ready to just fly into a blind rage over some perceived slight or a massive frustration, did taking a deep breath and silently counting to 10 truly make that anger vanish? Traditional anger management constantly pushes these little tips and tricks, but let's be honest, do they actually work when you're in the heat of the moment?
Well, the answer, quite bluntly, is no. These clumsy, forced attempts to stay calm, they're completely futile, and they actually fight against human nature. Because by the time you're trying to suppress an outburst, you're already agitated. You're just treating a symptom. It's like fighting a losing battle against your own emotions, and it leaves you entirely drained in the process.
So let's dive into a better way. Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're unpacking Never Get Angry Again and exploring the absolute paradigm shift that's required to completely eliminate emotional reactivity. To pull this off, we're going to systematically deconstruct the root cause of our anger, pulling directly from Dr. David J. Lieberman's groundbreaking insights. Think about that tangled, chaotic scribble you see right over the word anger on the book's cover. That scribble perfectly captures typical anger management tools. It's like using weed killer. You have to keep spraying it all the time, over and over, just to keep the weeds from sprouting up. It's exhausting, it's only temporary, and honestly, no matter how vigilant you are, you're going to miss a few spots. To truly fix the problem, we have to stop just managing the weeds and actually pull them out by the root.
The ultimate antidote to this chaotic weed killer is actually pretty simple. It's perspective. Mark Twain famously said, "Comedy is tragedy plus time." Imagine a little kid whose favorite toy suddenly breaks. To that kid, it is an absolute tragedy. The whole world is ending. But as adults, we have perspective, right? We know the child is safe, they're loved, they're fed. The broken toy is actually totally insignificant in the grand scheme of things. Time provides that perspective, shifting our view so we can see today's events through the much wiser lens of tomorrow. And when we shift our perspective like that, negative emotions just dissolve naturally. No forced deep breathing required.
So to understand why we lose that perspective in the first place, we really have to look inward at these three internal forces that are constantly battling within us: the soul, the ego, and the body. The body just wants to escape and feel good right now, pure immediate gratification. The ego, on the other hand, is completely obsessed with looking good and protecting our super fragile image. But the soul? The soul wants to do what is actually good and right. So the crucial point here is this: true, unshakable self-esteem is only built when we make soul-oriented, responsible choices.
These three forces build into what we can think of as psychological math. Walk through this with me. When we make an irresponsible choice, like giving into the body or the ego, our self-esteem inherently drops. And because we don't respect our own choices, our ego has to expand to protect us from that really painful reality. An expanded ego completely narrows our perspective right onto ourselves. We get paranoid, we get overly sensitive, and we completely lose the ability to see the bigger picture. And the inevitable result of that narrowed, totally distorted reality? You guessed it, anger.
Which brings us to cognitive dissonance. That's that deeply uncomfortable tension we feel when reality directly conflicts with our beliefs. Now, the ego absolutely hates this tension, and it will drastically warp reality just to shield us from uncomfortable truths. The source text actually tells this darkly funny story of a man who genuinely believed he was a zombie. A psychiatrist literally pricks the man's finger and he starts bleeding. Now, the man's conclusion isn't, "Oh wow, I guess I'm alive." His conclusion is, "What do you know? Zombies do bleed." That is the terrifying, kind of absurd power of the ego. It will twist undeniable, concrete facts just to keep our false self-image intact.
When the ego takes over like that, we put on these masks that never come off. We become completely hollow. King Solomon stated this beautifully: "A lacking on the inside can never be satisfied with something from the outside." People operating with really low self-esteem basically become bottomless pits. Because they can't nourish themselves with responsible choices and self-respect, they hopelessly try to convert other people's validation or love or even fear into their own self-worth. But pouring water into a shattered cup is never ever going to fill it.
An inflated ego like that completely isolates us from the world. We see this super clearly in the stark contrast between sympathy and empathy. Honestly, sympathy is actually quite self-centered. It's totally consumed by personal pain. You might pity someone, but really you just want to get away, to reduce your own discomfort. Empathy, however, requires you to completely drop the ego. It's the capacity to truly share emotion and genuinely seek to alleviate another person's suffering without making it all about yourself. True emotional health allows us to connect. The ego just takes out some scissors and cuts the cord.
Okay,
Let's apply this to a situation we all know way too well. You get cut off in traffic. Why do you suddenly speed up just to look at the driver who did it? It's kind of absurd, right? But you do it because you are unconsciously evaluating the situation to decide just how personally you should take it. You want to see if they look like someone who deliberately disrespected you. Your ego is practically frantic, searching for proof that you were targeted.
And this brings us to the very root of the whole problem. What is really at the core of our anger? It's counterfeit shame. It's this agonizing, totally ego-driven belief that I am less if you think I am less. Anger is simply an illusion of control. It's triggered by the terrifying, completely false fear that another person's poor behavior somehow proves our own inadequacy. We get angry because we mistakenly believe their disrespect means we are fundamentally broken.
Because the ego perceives this counterfeit shame as a literal physical threat to our survival, anger mimics the body's fight-or-flight instinct. It releases a flood of adrenaline to mask the pain of our vulnerability, effectively tricking us into feeling powerful. And depending on your personality, this can look really different. It manifests as assertive aggression, where you fight directly, or maybe passive aggression, where you flee into subtle control. Sometimes it's suppression, where you pretend you aren't mad at all, or it could be immobilization, where you just freeze and shut the whole world out entirely. The physical toll of using anger to escape this pain is immense. The stress hormone cortisol floods your system, and it literally damages your hippocampus, diminishing your ability to learn and think. Yeah, anger literally makes us dumb. Remember that famous Stanford marshmallow test? Children who couldn't delay gratification exhibited much more hostile anger and lower self-esteem later in life. Anger destroys our logic. It ties us to the sunk cost fallacy, where we flat out refuse to admit we're wrong just to protect our fragile ego.
To break this destructive cycle, we have to draw a hard line between pain and suffering. Pain is an unavoidable catalyst for growth. It's a totally necessary physical or emotional alert that something needs attention. Suffering, however? Suffering is a choice. Suffering is the emotional consequence of the ego choosing to ignore reality. When we refuse to accept the truth, when we dwell in self-pity and play the victim, we take temporary pain and turn it into prolonged, toxic suffering.
Let's pull the lens all the way back now. Sometimes life just feels incredibly unfair, right? And we get angry at the entire universe. The text introduces this really cool concept of mazal. It's often mistranslated simply as luck, but mazal is actually the confluence of conditions and circumstances required to complete and perfect your specific soul. Basically, everyone receives unique, tailor-made challenges. They aren't cosmic punishments. They are the exact, synchronized instruments meant to optimize your personal growth and purpose.
When we accept that, we completely reverse that psychological math we talked about earlier. We enter an upward spiral. By making responsible choices, our self-esteem rises and our ego shrinks. This expands our perspective. And with a wider perspective, we finally gain context for our struggles, transforming them into real meaning and genuine pleasure. Ultimately, trusting this process neutralizes our fear and resentment and leaves us with deep, permanent joy and gratitude.
Now, getting into that state of joy requires total reality acceptance. But please, take away this really crucial, gentle point. Acceptance is not approval. Radically accepting your past trauma, your current circumstances, or even your own flaws does not mean you're resigning yourself to victimhood or just giving up. It means you are finally stripping away the fake mask. You're acknowledging exactly where you're starting from so that true healing and genuine change can actually begin.
And you know, when you achieve that kind of total self-acceptance, your interactions with the world change entirely. Carl Jung noted, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. When you fully accept your own faults, seeing those same faults in someone else doesn't trigger your ego anymore. It triggers empathy. You aren't threatened. So instead of lashing out in irritation, your heart actually goes out to them because you know exactly what they are struggling with.
Which leaves us with one final, pretty provocative thought. You are in control of how you process reality. You can keep fighting your own nature, spraying emotional weed killer on every little frustration, constantly trying to count to 10 while your blood just boils. Or you can cure your self-esteem, accept reality without the ego's distortion, and eliminate the need for anger entirely. So, what's it going to be? Will you keep managing the weeds, or will you finally pull the root?